Hi, my name is Kenny Perez, and I will be talking to you about anticipatory grief. The status of grief is an emotion. Some argue that grief is not an emotional state, but rather an emotional process. Others maintain that grief is better understood as an emotional breakdown rather than an emotion. But when we're talking about anticipatory grief, is the emotions a person experiences while expecting someone to die. During this period of anticipation, individuals begin the task of mourning and begins to experience the various responses of grief. Some studies have suggested that people who had some advance earning of a pending death did better when asserted at 13 months post-death than did people who did not have this advance warning. Although other studies have suggested that grief did not ameliorate or foreshorten the bereavement process. So we have to understand that everyone grieves differently. It is a multi-determined. There are many mediators of this behavior, all contributing in different ways. The mourning process does begin early, and it involves the various tasks of mourning. So, for example, let's talk about task 1. In task 1, there's already an answer, and it's already, they have already made the choice of acceptance because they know the person would die. So working through this task is early. Sometimes some individuals experience the opposite and are in denial because they don't want this event to really happen. So those that see their loved ones deteriorate, for example, let's say someone that's dying from cancer, it brings the reality and the inevitability of death that is getting closer. And unfortunately, some cases go to the extremes of holding out on hope and reinforce denial. But overall, task 1, many individuals do have the acceptance that their loved one is dying. When we talk about task 2, during this process, individuals with anticipatory grief experience a lot of anxiety. The separation anxiety can be real for them, and it's harsh for those processing this type of grief, especially if the length of anticipatory increases or the person's proximity to death. So seeing the deterioration of a parent, for example, will lead to uncertainties that they may ask themselves, oh my God, I'll be experiencing this in the future. I'm the next generation that might go through this same situation. And this is what they call personal death awareness. And this happens a lot during death. Family members question themselves a lot. Could I ever have this? If my dad had cancer and he died of it, am I gonna die? If my father was alcoholic, am I gonna be an alcoholic? Am I gonna die because of alcohol? So there's a personal death awareness happening in task 2. Let's talk about task 3. Survivors do role rehearsal, meaning they prepare themselves to live without their loved ones. So this type of role rehearsal is normal, and it plays an important part in overall coping. At times when this occurs, individuals may be looked as if they were insensitive, or they're making plans too early before death, and so they may feel criticized. But people don't understand that it is an effective way of coping. It's a very good way of coping. So doing a role rehearsal can help during task 3. There are situations that individuals are wanting to long the death of their loved ones. And they're in those situations, they start feeling like guilty for wanting the death to occur sooner, as if they want to get it over with. And it is not an unusual situation, particularly if the dying person is requiring much care and is in seriously deteriorated condition. So individuals do start to feel that guilt for having that feeling of, okay, it's time for them to go. There's other cases or other situations where they may have an extremely ambivalent relationship, which can cause problematic issues to the patient and medical staff. So there's some relationships that there's mixed feelings of what's happening, and this can occur in a anticipatory grief. I want to share with you an experience of this type of grief. And I personally haven't experienced one with a close family member, but I did know of a family from a church that the head of the house, the father, had survived cancer already in the past. But unfortunately, cancer came back, and it was just worse, and it was way faster. He was deteriorating much, much faster, and death was near. So my husband and I, we had visited this family a couple of times, and we were there to encourage them, of course. But I did notice the teen son, this teenager, he always had an expression or attitude of acceptance, as if he had already accepted that his father was dying. He was a very calm person, and really showed that emotion of acceptance. On the other hand, I personally felt it hit me hard, seeing how different he was, how he was deteriorating, how I had remembered him as someone tall and big and tough and full of life, and now, seeing him as a skeleton, technically, and literally, it was really hard. It hit me really hard, and it impacted me, seeing this situation, that to this day, I kind of feared dying from cancer. I've always prayed and asked God, I don't want to die that way. It was a disturbing situation. But I learned a lesson how, instead of me going out there for encouragement, I saw his family, his son, particularly his teenager, how he had a heart. He had accepted this situation, and he had left this situation under God's hands, and he had this peace in him, unexplainable. So it was a very interesting experience. I want to share with you an article from Varga and Gallagher, who on their article, they stated that as a moral emotion, grief can make salient the norms of intimate relationships and desert, and unveil attachments that are essential to the practical identities of human agents. So grief can help us gain awareness of facets of our practical identities. And that it's really interesting to know. Now, how can someone or a counselor help a person experiencing anticipatory grief? It is perhaps surprisingly that there is no unified framework for understanding grief and no consensus or even what paradigm cases of grief are. It is important to go over unfinished business. Yes, that's one of the things that counselors should do. Make sure the client goes over unfinished business because it's important for them to express what they have in their hearts and what they're feeling. Maybe express the appreciation or disappointment that they have, things that they want to say to their loved one that's about to die. And this is key to do because when it's done, individuals have satisfaction of taking care of the things that they wanted to deal with. And this process doesn't have to be done during regular grief counseling. So often people need encouragement or permission to do this, and when they do, they feel much, much better. So we also need to see the other end of the spectrum. Now, we've been talking about the person that's grieving for what's anticipating, but how about the other side? How about the other end of the spectrum? The person who is dying often has many attachments in his or own life. They are losing not one, but many significant others all at once. So it's very, very difficult to process this type of grief. It's not only on the one that's staying behind, but also the one that is dying. Another way that counselors can help this type of grief is to encourage support group. Support group can help individuals with the anticipation of the death. A social setting can help them cope with the feelings that they are processing. Sharing the thoughts and feelings can give individuals a sense of freedom, as if they are letting go of all their internal feelings. Just like what Dr. Gilbert mentioned in a YouTube video that we saw, and she expressed her story about her son's suicide. That one thing that helped her was opening herself to others. So sharing things with others that are going through the same thing allows individuals to cope better and feel better. Research has shown that individuals who take on positive disposition and display affirmative emotions when talking through recent losses tend to show stronger adjustments after their initial bereavement has dissipated. So yes, talking and sharing is very important. So counselors should promote this. Counselors should also promote growth. Those that are experiencing a sense of growth exhibit positive changes in ways of relating to others, develop a new understanding of themselves as stronger and more capable, initiative. They encourage them to initiate new life adventures and gain more satisfaction with their sense of spirituality and existential issues. And again, let me end. Social support. The benefit of social support have surfaced as effective in management of existent stressors and strengthening interpersonal relationships. So those social supports can be, for example, church, Sunday school, Bible studies, women's group, men's group. It is a perfect style of coping strategies for those who are going through an anticipatory grief. Thank you.